This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting the show is David Schemm, State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, as he explains the state committee and highlights commodity per acre rates. Jill Zimmerman, President of the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program, continues today's show discussing the KARL program and how people can become a part of the community. Part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast concludes the show as Brad White, Bob Larson, and Scott Fritz converse about timing options for checking cow pregnancy. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show talking with the State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Good to be here on a new year.
David, as you're starting the new calendar year at the Farm Service Agency, what's in the works?
You know, there's been a lot of things going on, opportunity, obviously, to look over the past year. You know, I came on in May of this last year, so not been quite a full year for me from a calendar perspective here, but it is a new year here, and definitely one of those people that, like a lot of farmers, I like to plan for the year and lay out those goals and those priorities. Definitely been working with that from an agency perspective here. Talking with our district directors for people out there, Kansas FSA, we are divided up into 7 districts across the state. You know, there's approximately 3 districts along the northern tier and 4 districts along the southern tier of the state. They each of my district directors kind of manages, roughly at 12 to 13, 14 county offices, depending upon the district, within each of their district there. And, it's one of the things that we do is we try to make sure we have quarterly, what we call senior leadership conferences. And so getting the year started off on the right foot here, just coming up here this next week, Shelby, we're going to be having our senior leadership conference, and our district directors will be coming in here to the state office, and we're going to be, just reviewing a lot of things that we need to look at from an agency perspective, ensuring that we're getting these programs delivered out there to our programs, areas that we can be doing better, either from a policy or obviously an HR standpoint there. That's some of the things that's obviously we're looking at as we evaluate in the various programs there and looking at our employee and staffing level and be moving forward. So a lot of things going on. We're looking forward here soon to be able to have a state committee coming on board. So we start getting those meetings planned. And, as soon as we're excited for when the secretary will make the announcement for our state committee and then be bringing the state committee on board. So just a lot of things going on, Shelby, as we look into a new year, but definitely from an agency perspective, it's the thing that we really are bringing into part of our vision is that our goal is from our senior leadership is making sure that Kansas FSA is that gold standard out there in delivering those services to our producers out there, especially with the challenging times here. We know there's not just the normal programs, Shelby, obviously, but even these ad hoc programs that come down. Make sure we're setting the gold standard and delivering them.
You mentioned that state committee. What is a state committee for the Farm Service Agency in Kansas? The
state committee, FSA's, I always liken to, it's got kind of an interesting structure for people that are not fully aware of it. But I think a lot of our producers out there, Shelby, are aware of our county committees, that in each one of our counties, it's through an election process that a county committee is elected or selected by their peer group and serves on there. And that county committee is responsible for appeals from producers or relief cases. I think, I've talked a little bit about it in the past. Situations come up where, possibly a producer was, late in filing, some applications of no fault of their own. And so they can either be asking for relief from that to still be able to qualify for the program, or possibly appeal. Say the county office say we've got to reject this, but in a lot of times those situations, the producers have the opportunity to appeal that to a county committee, and so those county committees can to listen to the producer, figure out what the dynamics are, and either agree with the producer or disagree, whatever their decision comes down to there. So the state committee is just like a next level above that, Shelby. Sometimes in the county committee, maybe it's a certain dollar amount that it goes above their authority, because they can only grant relief and in certain levels. And so the dollar amount, for when they signed up for a program would be a little bit larger. So that level goes up to the state committee, or perhaps the situation where, even after the producer appealed to the county committee still did not agree. And so the producer a lot of times still has the right to appeal to the state committee, kind of like that judicial system, Shelby. So that's kind of what a state committee does. But the state committee even has a lot more expanded authority when we start talking about, considering, where an approved double crop area is, or where an approved continuous cropping practice, say for wheat, is. That's where a state committee really can come in and weigh in responsible is. The state committee is a little bit different from a county committee in the aspect they're actually not elected. It's a political appointment. So it's appointed by the secretary there. And so, based upon, recommendations to the secretary, she either approves or that and appoints those people. I'll just tell you this, technically they are a one-year appointment, but typically they are for the full term of the administration. So that's what typically they are, but technically, like I said, they are just a one-year appointment. So the state committee is a little bit like my position as state executive director. It is a political appointed position.
For the state committee, how do they choose from where a person's going to get appointed? Is it someone from each district, or how does the secretary make that choice?
Sure. So I'm actually a great question, great point to bring up there, Shelby. So that's actually by policy, one of the key things that we've got to be cognizant of. So our state committee is a 5-member state committee. Obviously, with 7 districts, we don't have the bandwidth to be able to pull it out of every district. But that is by policy, is that we need to make sure that our state committee represents geographically the state. So that's one of the criteria that we do go by, Shelby, when we're submitting those recommendations up to the secretary, is people that are from across the state. I mentioned before, I've had the incredible blessing and pleasure to be able to have visited all 105 counties. I've visited all 96 of our county offices, and without question, I can very much say that we are a very diverse state when you go across the state. So again, having that geographical representation across the state is definitely a key factor for our state committee.
And when we're thinking then about our producers across the state, recently got an update on what commodity per acre rates are going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about the Farmer Bridge Assistance program that we recently announced here at the end of this last year. It was released what that commodity rate per acre was out there, just pretty extensive list. And again, people can go to Farmers.gov for that a little bit more extensive list there, but just kind of hitting some of the highlights. The corn rate was $44.36. Cotton was $117.35. Sorghum was $48.11. Soybeans was $30.88, and wheat was $39.35 on that. There's a lot of others, whether it's chickpeas or flax, mustard, oats, peanuts. Obviously, a lot of other rates were released as well. And again, if people are a little bit curious, I definitely encourage them to go to farmers.gov and look at that. But those commodity rates are based upon a per acre. And so, it's for what the planted crops were this last year in 2025. And I should say planted or harvested. Obviously, for winter wheat, those for those producers that actually planted in 24 and then harvested it in 25. That's how we count that wheat crop there, that winter wheat crop at least there. But no, when we look at our acreage there, for corn, this last year, we were just shy of 7 million acres. Cotton, we were a little over 100,000 acres. Sorghum, we were around 2.5 million acres. Sunflowers, we're the sunflower state, but this last year we only had about 24,000 acres, at least for what we have for records. And soybeans, 4.2 million acres. Wheat, we showed right around 8 million acres. Long story short, Shelby, with this Farmer Bridge Assistance Program, again, just rough projections, but we're projecting it could have an impact on the state here around $890 million going out in this program here. So again, just highlighting on that program, producers will be receiving a pre-filled forms here. We're hopeful maybe end of January, 1st of February, those forms should be going out. And then as the secretary announced here, as we get the end of February, those payments will be start issuing out there to all of our producers there. And again, what I kind of opened up here today, one of our priorities from an agency perspective is that we're going to be quick. And as we have the authority given to us from the national office, we're going to be processing those payments and getting them out to producers very quickly.
David, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Well, thank you, Shelby, so much, and definitely Happy New Year there to you, and Happy New Year out there to all of our producers, hoping and praying for a very rainy, bountiful season, not too rainy when we don't need the rain, but rainy when we do need the rain.
Absolutely. That was State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program with Jill Zimmerman, who is the president of the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program. Jill, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Always appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, Shelby.
Jill, the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program, also commonly referred to as KARL, and what is this program?
Yeah, so Shelby, we're 35, 36 years old. We were started in the 80s, and really KARL is a program. It's a 2-year leadership development program that's designed to identify, prepare, and connect leaders in Kansas that can actively go back to our rural communities and then positively affect change in agriculture in our rural communities.
What impact have you seen it have on the people who have attended this program?
I think you'll often hear, Shelby, and I'm going to paraphrase because that's that's a difficult question. We could spend the whole time talking about impact of the program over that 35 years, but we've often seen people that are motivated to make change, motivated to serve their communities in different ways. You've seen people that have made career changes as a result of that. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that you can describe impact to serve, impact to give, impact to, I just think that there's a lot of different ways that we can talk about service and leadership. And I really think it's summarizing it as making the places that we call home or work better. And so we all know the needs of our rural communities and our homes are changing every day. And I think the impact of the program and the ripple effect of the program, it often isn't measured immediately once folks transition from being an associate to a fellow. It's one of those processes that often takes time to see that. But I also think that one thing that is how do you quantify the growth of their confidence, recognizing that they have a network around them that can help them, influence them into making different decisions or raising their hands to serve in different rooms. And so I think a lot of times you'll see that people will see themselves in places that they otherwise didn't see themselves before.
And do you currently have a class that is hopefully getting to experience that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So class 17 is in year 2 of that experience, and they have 2 stateside seminars left and then their international capstone experience. And so as each class kind of marches through that experience of 2 years, you begin to see over time, I think as we mix livestock together and people become more comfortable and just more, you start to see that build within the class, just the familiarity, the confidence, understanding, ability to reach out. And I think it just underscores the importance of life, that a lot of the connections we have in life are meant to be in person. And I think you get a lot more from these types of experiences by them being in person.
How have you seen, as we're just looking at Class 17, them grow?
You think back to the first seminar. So the first seminar would have been in August of 24. First time we met them was in June of 24. First time we interviewed them was in May of 24. And so how have you seen them grow? I think you just see really that network grow and embracing the opportunity that they've been given. And I think there's also a really strong influence amongst them to share about their experiences, to share about how their work is meaningful. And so to see people that are willing to continue to step up and make that difference and share those stories, I think is really impactful.
And Jill, yourself also a member or a fellow from the KARL program, and how have, from when you attended and were a part of this program to now being the president of it, seen things that have held steady?
I think things that have held steady over time, Shelby, and I was really young when I was accepted into the program because I was in Class 5 and we're on Class 17 now. And so as I reflect on, I always go back and relationships and people, right? People and relationships and people. And I think agriculture is deeply rooted in the connections that we develop with people. And so agriculture is really small, but I think the ripple effect that we see from being involved in KARL just continues to grow. And I think in my role as president, we always want to be able to offer opportunities for folks that are in the program and even folks that are now fellows of the program, opportunities to see places, go places, meet people, and have experiences that maybe in their every other day lives they don't have. And it is through that shared learning experience that they really continue to grow in their own space as adults. As adults, we really have to continue to invest in ourselves to make the places that we live and call home better. But every day I go back to it's people, right? It's people and relationships. And if we make that investment in people, I just think we will be benefited. And lately, just some experiences that I've had where people have invested or just been very intentional about making a personal connection. I just think it really benefits us in life.
You mentioned a ripple effect, and as this is a Kansas program, do you see it go beyond state lines, whether looking in agriculture or rural communities?
Yeah, I do see that. And I think agriculture is a local. When I say local, right, it's both global and it's local, right? And so as part of the program, through the shared learning experience that you have with 29 other folks to be selected in the program, we travel to Lincoln, Nebraska. We travel to Kansas City, Missouri, which technically that's kind of local, right? But we also go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. We go to Washington, D.C., and then every class has an international experience, right? And it is through those shared learning experiences that we learn more about each other. We learn more about ourselves. We learn more about the world that we're trying to feed and clothe, right? And so the better that we can understand about all of those countries, all of those places that we go, just consumer trends and preferences and things like that, that impacts every decision that we make every day at home on our farms and in the places we call home, right? And so I just think that that's super important.
As we begin 2026, is there an opportunity for more people to become a part of the KARL community?
Yeah, absolutely. So on even years, since it's a 2-year program, folks can only apply to be a part of the program in even years. Applications are open January 1 through April 1 of 2026. And so me or a member of our team are happy to answer questions as people, if they're interested or curious about the program. They can self-nominate. They can be nominated by someone else. You can inquire through our website if you have questions, or you can certainly reach out to us at our office.
What are some important factors for people who are looking at applying to be a part of the KARL program?
Well, I think there's always, are you ready for that shared learning experience, right? So there is an investment, both a personal investment from with tuition. The tuition is $5,600, which is over 2 years. And then I think the other thing to consider is the right time in your life to be a part of that shared learning experience, because it takes 52 days over the course of 2 years. And so you just want to make sure that if you're going to carve that time away from your life, that you do have the time to make that investment, because you're really making an investment in yourself. And there's a lot of leadership lessons that come along the way through that shared learning experience. And so I think the consideration is, do I have the time and do I have the support from my folks at work or my family and those that are around me to make that happen? And I don't think folks regret finding the time to make it happen.
For people who have been a part of KARL, is there an upcoming event that they might want to put on their calendars?
So yeah, we have regional events coming up. That in 2026, we'll have an event in Wichita. We will have an event in February in Hayes. And then really the capstone event for the program happens on the first Saturday in June. And the first Saturday of June is when we announce Class 18. And then we will celebrate the accomplishments of Class 17. It's a day that's chock full of activities. We have great speakers and just a lot of engagement. The events here in Manhattan and every other year it happens, and we host traditionally around 250 people at that event. And so it's really become an awesome networking event that we really bring people together. And I think we had a committee meeting earlier this week, and so we're really thinking about how do we celebrate those and make those reunions of those different classes more meaningful so that it keeps that alumni engaged.
Jill, can you remind us what website people can go to find more information?
www.karlprogram.com. So karlprogram.com.
That was president of the Kansas Agriculture Rural Leadership Program, Jill Zimmerman. As she mentioned, you can find more information about this program by going to their website, karlprogram.com. That is KARLPROGRAM.com. You can apply to be a part of the Next KARL class, as the application window is now open through April 1st. I will put a link in today's show notes on agtoday.net, which you can also use to find out more information about KARL. We're cutting to a short break now, but when we come back, we'll be joined by the Beef Cattle Institute with part of their Cattle Chat podcast. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, and Scott Fritz.
I've got some cows, July, August bred. When should I preg check them? And in the question, they say, I think I need to wait at least 60 days because there might be some pregnancy loss before that. How long do I have to wait? And we're thinking about doing a blood test versus pregnancy checking by palpation. So there's a couple different facets to this, and I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really comes down to a number of different questions that I would turn around and ask the producer, such as, what are you going to do with the information that you gather at pregnancy check? So one of the things that has value from determining pregnancy status is once we wean the calves, and now we're going to start to usually winter feeding, depending on when they calve. There's no reason to winter feed a cow that does not have a calf inside of her. And so a lot of people will pregnancy check about the time that they wean the calves in order to really identify open cows so that they can go either directly to market or be fed for a while and then go to market, because they're not going to be productive in the following year. Another reason to pregnancy check is to really monitor the reproductive success of the herd. What I really like to do is to get a preg check in early enough that we can accurately stage, particularly the early part of the breeding season. So the first 3 weeks of the breeding season, maybe the first 6 weeks of the breeding season, and identify those cows that became pregnant early. My definition of early is they got pregnant in the first 3 weeks of the breeding season. It tells me a lot about the past winter feeding program. It tells me about the past calving pattern of that herd and bull fertility. So I think there's extra information if not only do we define cows that are pregnant and not pregnant, but when they got pregnant. And part of the reason to do that is if my breed up isn't as good as I would like, now I can start investigating, because the pattern we see of bull problems or disease problems or cows that were a little thin going into the breeding season, when I really kind of plot out when cows got pregnant, those look a little bit different, whether it's a bull problem or a winter feeding problem or anything else. And so I can start doing some diagnostics with that information. So that is part of the question, is what am I going to do with this information? So if all I want to know is she pregnant or not going into the winter feeding program, the time I should preg check is at that transition from usually about the time we wean the calf. If I want more information, such as how many got pregnant in the first 21 days or how many got pregnant in the first 42 days, I need to move my pregnancy check up earlier in order to be accurate. And this is a kind of a misnomer. The later I check pregnancy, probably the more accurate I am as far as, yes, she's pregnant, no, she's not. But if I want to know who got pregnant early, so let's say we turn bulls out on May the 20th. If I want to know the cows that got pregnant between May 20th and June 11th, I need to do my preg check early enough that I can really tell those cows, and that when I'm palpating or using an ultrasound, that they are different than cows that got pregnant a little bit later. And the best time for that is, kind of no more than 100 days later. So you're talking 3 to 4 months after that is kind of my window for identifying those cows that got pregnant in the first 21 days. So if I turn bulls out on May 20th, you go 3 more months, that's June, July, August 20th to September 20th would be the ideal time to really identify those early bred cows. For some herds, that works really, really well. Other herds, that's not a time they're typically gathering the cattle. And so then you have to start weighing what's the added value of determining that information and the need to gather cows kind of in the late summer grazing period.
So from that early and late and kind of boil it down, Scott, when you were in practice, when did you advise your clients to preg check if they wanted to stage pregnancies, as Bob mentioned?
As early as possible. And that August-September timeline was also a great time. If we could round everybody up, you could do pre-weaning vaccines on the calves at the same time and then preg check cows and have all that information sorted. And then most of my producers were row crop farmers, and so we ran into silage cutting and corn harvest at the time where we would typically like to transition to our winter feeding. And so we could have all that decided months in advance and could manage those groups however we needed to.
Once again, that was Scott Fritz, Bob Larson, and Brad White with part of a BCI Cattle Chat podcast. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.